They laughed when the humans stepped onto the training floor. They stopped laughing when the station alarms began to scream. Valkyr Station hung above the storm world Nerith like a blade forged from silver and ice. Nearly 2 miles long, the Interstellar Military Academy rotated slowly against the darkness, its armored hull illuminated by distant flashes from the electrical storms raging across the planet below. Inside Training Hall 7, rows of cadets stood beneath brilliant white lights reflecting off polished steel floors. The air smelled faintly of machine oil, ozone, and cold recycled oxygen. Hundreds of recruits from 20 different civilizations waited in perfect formation while senior officers observed from elevated command platforms overlooking the chamber. Towering Orolith warriors stood nearly 7 feet tall, their ceremonial training armor gleaming beneath the lights. Massive Karen cadets shifted impatiently on reinforced flooring. Even the smallest species present still outweighed the average human by almost 100 pounds. Then Ryan Miller walked through the entrance hatch carrying a single duffel bag. Conversation stopped. The human looked almost painfully ordinary. He stood just over 6 feet tall with short brown hair, blue-gray eyes, and a lean build developed more by endurance than brute strength. His standard Terran Exchange uniform lacked decorative armor plates, ceremonial markings, or family insignia. Compared to the alien recruits surrounding him, he appeared remarkably fragile. Several cadets openly stared. Others whispered. A few simply laughed. Ryan seemed not to notice. He quietly moved toward the final position assigned on the formation display and set his bag neatly beside his boots. Above the training floor, Captain Alara Voss studied the human through the observation platform glass. Her luminous golden eyes narrowed slightly. Beside her, Lieutenant Saris folded her arms. That cannot be the Terran candidate. Alara reviewed the personnel display hovering before her. Recruit Ryan Miller. Terran Exchange Program. Lieutenant Saris looked unconvinced. He appears underdeveloped. Another officer laughed softly. Perhaps humans trained differently. Alara remained silent. The humans certainly did not resemble the warriors she expected from a recognized Deathworld species. No visible natural armor. No enhanced musculature. No claws, scales, or defensive adaptations. Just skin. Soft skin. A sharp tone echoed throughout the chamber. Instantly, every cadet snapped to attention. Captain Alara descended from the command platform, her silver-white hair secured tightly behind her head. The entire hall fell silent as she walked across the polished floor. "Welcome to Valkyr Station," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. "You were selected because your governments believe you possess exceptional potential. Here, potential means nothing." She paced slowly before the assembled recruits. Only performance matters. Her gaze briefly settled upon Ryan. Several nearby cadets noticed immediately. So did Ryan. He simply maintained his posture. Alara continued. "Over the next 12 weeks, many of you will fail. Some will request reassignment. Others will discover they were never soldiers to begin with." She stopped directly before Ryan. The silence became absolute. "Recruit Miller," she said calmly. "Step forward." Ryan obeyed immediately. Alara activated her wrist display. A holographic biometric profile appeared above her hand. "Terran baseline physiology," she read aloud. "Bone density, below Orolith military minimum. Muscular output, 42% below station average. Natural environmental protection, negligible." Quiet laughter spread through the ranks. Alara continued reading. "Recommended atmospheric oxygen concentration significantly higher than Academy standard." More laughter followed. Ryan stood perfectly still. "Recruit Miller," Alara asked. "Do humans routinely survive military operations with such limitations?" Ryan considered the question seriously. "Usually, ma'am." The laughter became louder. Even several officers smiled. Ryan did not. He simply adjusted the strap on his right glove and returned his hands behind his back. Captain Alara studied him for another moment. Something about the human unsettled her. Not confidence. Not arrogance. Familiarity. As though standing alone while others laughed was something he had experienced many times before. Outside the station windows, lightning flashed silently across the clouds of Nerith. Inside Training Hall 7, no one noticed the weather alert appearing briefly on the Central Operations display before disappearing again. Training Hall 7 transformed within minutes. The formal introduction ended. Massive armored partitions descended from the ceiling with a deep mechanical rumble, separating the recruits into assessment groups. Bright white lights dimmed, replaced by cool blue illumination reflecting across polished steel walls. Holographic terrain projections flickered into existence above the training floor. Snow-covered mountains, deep ice ravines, violent wind patterns. Ryan Miller recognized the environment immediately. Not exactly, but close enough. High altitude, extreme cold, low visibility. Home, in a different language. Initial survival assessment begins in 15 minutes, Captain Alara Voss announced from the elevated command platform. Each team will enter a controlled simulation environment designed to evaluate leadership, adaptability, and endurance. Lieutenant Saris activated a secondary display. Environmental conditions will exceed normal comfort thresholds for most species. Several cadets nodded confidently. One enormous Karen recruit flexed 4 armored arms. Nearby Orlith cadets exchanged amused glances while discreetly watching Ryan. The human simply checked the straps on his boots. Again, Alara noticed. "Recruit Miller," she called. Ryan looked up immediately. "Ma'am, are you familiar with Sub-Zero operations?" Quiet laughter moved through the chamber. Ryan considered the question. "Yes, ma'am." "Military experience?" "Civilian search and rescue, ma'am." More laughter. Orlith cadets openly smiled now. Search and rescue sounded embarrassingly peaceful compared to military service. Lieutenant Saris did not bother hiding her amusement. "How charming." Ryan nodded politely. "Sometimes." Alara studied him carefully. No irritation. No embarrassment. The human accepted ridicule the way experienced soldiers accepted rain. That unsettled her more than defiance would have. Assignment displays illuminated above the chamber floor. Ryan found himself placed in Team 12 alongside 5 alien cadets, including 2 Orlith recruits who immediately looked disappointed. One of them, Cadet Larissa, approached him openly. "Remain behind us during the exercise," she said confidently. "Your species lacks appropriate environmental adaptations." Ryan adjusted his gloves. "All right." Larissa blinked. "That is all." Ryan shrugged gently. "You seem to have a plan." The simplicity of the answer somehow irritated her. Nearby, another cadet laughed. "Perhaps humans surrender quickly." Ryan smiled faintly. "Depends what is at stake." Before anyone could respond, warning sirens briefly chirped overhead. Every officer immediately looked toward the central operations display. A weather alert flashed across the screen. Electrical disturbance detected. Nerith storm activity increasing. The message vanished almost instantly. Training continued. Yet Alara noticed several engineering technicians speaking urgently near the control stations. She filed the observation away for later. Massive simulation doors slowly opened around the chamber. Beyond them waited artificial mountain environments stretching nearly half a mile inside Valkyr Station's training sectors. Frozen cliffs, ice caverns, deep snow fields. Powerful atmospheric generators already filled the distant corridors with swirling frost. Cold air rolled across the training floor. Ryan inhaled unconsciously. Dry air, thin air, familiar air. Cadet Larissa noticed. "You appear nervous." Ryan looked toward the artificial mountains. "No." "Then what?" For the first time, genuine warmth touched the human's expression. "Honestly." He shouldered his small equipment pack. "This reminds me of Colorado." Larissa frowned in confusion. She would remember those words less than an hour later. Above them, hidden deep within Valkyr Station's infrastructure, the first major power fluctuation struck the simulation control network. No one in Training Hall 7 noticed. The mountains were already waiting. The doors of Simulation Sector 12 sealed behind the recruits with a heavy metallic thud. Instantly, the temperature dropped. Frost spread across steel railings. Artificial wind generators roared to life somewhere high above the mountain chamber, sending fine snow swirling through the air. Team 12 stood at the entrance platform overlooking miles of simulated alpine terrain illuminated by pale white light. Jagged ice cliffs rose toward the ceiling nearly 300 feet overhead. Deep ravines cut across the landscape like frozen scars. A navigation beacon blinked faintly on a distant ridge almost 2 miles away. Lieutenant Saris's voice echoed through concealed speakers. "Objective: reach Beacon Alpha within 3 hours. Team survival and cohesion will determine final evaluation scores." The countdown began immediately. Cadet Larissa took command without hesitation. Formation Pattern 3, she ordered. The alien recruits obeyed instantly. Ryan Miller quietly adjusted his pack straps and joined the rear position exactly as instructed. No one questioned it. No one expected the human to contribute much anyway. The first half-mile progressed smoothly. Most alien recruits moved confidently across packed snow and icy inclines. Ryan remained silent, carefully observing everything around him. The angle of drifting snow, the changing sound beneath their boots, the direction of airflow through narrow passages. Above the observation deck, Captain Alara Voss monitored Team 12 alongside dozens of instructors. Human recruit remains passive, Lieutenant Saris observed. Alara nodded slightly. He follows instructions. He hides behind stronger cadets. Alara said nothing. She noticed something the others had missed. The human never stumbled. Not once. Nearly 40 minutes into the exercise, Team 12 entered a narrow ice canyon leading toward higher elevations. Wind intensity increased dramatically. Visibility decreased. Snow began moving sideways across the trail. Ryan finally spoke. We should avoid this route. The group stopped. Cadet Larissa turned toward him. Excuse me. Ryan pointed toward the canyon walls. Wind loading is building on the eastern slope. We should move around. Several cadets exchanged confused looks. Wind loading? One asked. Ryan looked upward. Too much fresh snow accumulating in one place. Larissa folded her arms. This is a simulation. Yes. Station engineers designed these environments. Yes. Then the route is safe. Ryan studied the canyon quietly. Maybe. Larissa sighed impatiently. Remain with the group, recruit Miller. They continued forward. Ryan followed without complaint. Above the chamber, warning lights suddenly flashed across the control consoles. An engineer stood abruptly. Power fluctuation in Sector 12 environmental systems. Lieutenant Saris frowned. Corrected. The engineer's expression changed. Controls are not responding. Every display flickered simultaneously. Captain Alara stepped toward the console. Explain. Storm interference from Nerith is disrupting internal systems. Another technician looked pale. Environmental safeguards just disengaged. Before anyone could respond, every monitor showing Sector 12 exploded into static. Deep inside the simulation chamber, Team 12 heard a sound unlike anything programmed into normal training scenarios. A low, distant rumble rolled through the mountains. Ryan stopped instantly. His face changed. Everybody move, he said sharply. No one moved. Cadet Larissa stared at him. What? The rumble grew louder. Snow cascaded from the cliffs above. Ryan looked directly at her. For the first time since arriving at Valkyr Station, there was command in his voice. Run. Now. The mountain answered Ryan's warning a second later. A deafening crack echoed through the canyon as tons of freshly accumulated snow broke loose high above the eastern ridge. White powder exploded into the narrow passage, transforming calm snowfall into a roaring avalanche of ice and wind. Cadet Larissa froze. So did everyone else. Ryan did not. Left side, he shouted. Move to the rocks. Stay together. The command carried such absolute certainty that the team obeyed instinctively. 6 recruits sprinted through knee-deep snow toward a jagged outcropping protruding from the canyon wall. Ryan remained behind long enough to grab the smallest cadet, a young Orlith named Sarah, whose foot had become trapped beneath unstable ice. He pulled her free and practically carried her the final 20 feet before the avalanche swept across the canyon floor. Snow and ice thundered past them in a blinding white wall. Then silence returned. Team 12 sat pressed against the rocks, breathing heavily. No one spoke for several seconds. Cadet Larissa stared at Ryan. How did you know? Ryan looked toward the buried trail. The wind changed. That is impossible. No. Ryan brushed snow from his jacket. You could hear hollow layers forming beneath the new snowpack. Above the simulation chamber, chaos erupted inside the control center. Technicians struggled desperately with failing systems. Environmental controls remained offline. Communications with the cadets had been completely severed. Captain Alara Voss stood rigid before the static-filled displays. Restore contact. We cannot, an engineer replied. The storm interference from Nerith overloaded the simulation network. Sector 12 is operating independently. Lieutenant Saris looked alarmed. Can we shut the chamber down? Negative. Safety protocols are frozen. Alara felt cold despite the warmth of the control room. Inside Sector 12, the exercise was no longer a simulation. It was survival. Deep in the canyon, Team 12 continued forward because there was no alternative. The original route had disappeared beneath snow and debris. Visibility dropped below 30 feet as artificial weather systems spiraled further out of control. Winds now exceeded 60 miles per hour. Frost accumulated rapidly across armor surfaces. The alien cadets who had mocked Ryan earlier were beginning to struggle. Their training had prepared them for combat scenarios, not prolonged mountain survival. Ryan noticed immediately. Everyone stop. The group obeyed without argument this time. Ryan moved from recruit to recruit, checking breathing patterns, glove seals, and thermal indicators. When he reached Sarah, he frowned. You are losing heat too quickly. The young cadet attempted a brave smile. I am fine. Ryan shook his head gently. No, you are not. Without hesitation, he removed an insulated emergency liner from his own pack and wrapped it around her shoulders. Cadet Larissa watched in confusion. You need that. Ryan adjusted his backpack straps. She needs it more. The words settled heavily among the group. Moments later, another problem emerged. Their navigation units had failed completely. The beacon no longer appeared on any display. Endless snow stretched in every direction. The recruits looked toward Larissa. Larissa looked toward Ryan. The human studied the mountains, closed his eyes briefly, then turned toward the northwest ridge. The wind sounds different over there, he said quietly. There is probably a sheltered route. No one questioned him. Not anymore. As Team 12 disappeared deeper into the artificial mountains, Captain Alara finally received partial access to Ryan Miller's personnel file. She opened it absent-mindedly. 30 seconds later, she stopped breathing. Across the screen appeared a civilian commendation from Colorado Mountain Rescue. Beneath it, a single sentence had been highlighted. Volunteer rescuer Ryan Miller returned into blizzard conditions twice to recover additional survivors. The storm intensified as Team 12 climbed toward the northwest ridge. Snow blasted sideways across the mountainside with such force that visibility dropped below 20 feet. The artificial sky above had disappeared completely behind swirling white clouds. Every surface looked identical. Up, down, left, right. The mountain had become a world made entirely of ice and wind. Yet Ryan Miller continued moving with steady confidence. He walked several feet ahead of the group, stopping occasionally to kneel beside the snow, study drifting patterns, or simply listen. Cadet Larissa no longer questioned him. None of them did. How are you navigating without instruments? She finally asked through the wind. Ryan pointed toward a line of frost-covered rocks partially buried beneath snow. Wind exposure. The recruits stared blankly. Ryan smiled faintly. Those rocks have less ice on the southern side. It means prevailing winds are coming from the west. The station beacon should be north of US. Cadet Sarah shook her head in disbelief. Humans can do this naturally? Ryan adjusted his backpack. Not all humans. He looked toward the storm. Just people who spend enough time getting lost. Despite the humor, exhaustion was becoming obvious throughout the team. The alien recruits had been trained for combat and tactical exercises, but prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures was taking a toll. Their breathing grew labored. Movement slowed. Frost-coated armor joints. Ryan noticed every detail. We stopped for 5 minutes, he announced. No one argued. He immediately directed the cadets into a shallow depression sheltered from the strongest winds. Using emergency thermal sheets and spare equipment, he constructed a simple windbreak against a cluster of rocks. The recruits watched in amazement. Where did you learn this? Larissa asked quietly. Ryan secured the final support line. Colorado. Is Colorado a military world? Ryan laughed softly. No. Then why would civilians know survival techniques? Ryan looked genuinely confused by the question. Because mountains do not care if you are military. The answer lingered in the cold air. Far above the simulation chamber, Captain Alara Voss continued reviewing Ryan's personnel file while engineers struggled desperately to regain control. The more she read, the more unsettled she became. Search and rescue volunteer. Wilderness medical certification. Avalanche response specialist. High-altitude emergency instructor. Dozens of documented civilian rescue operations. No combat decorations. No military commendations. Yet every report described the same pattern. Subject repeatedly prioritized civilian evacuation over personal safety. Lieutenant Saris noticed Alara's expression. "What is it?" Alara quietly rotated the display. Saris read the highlighted incident report. During severe winter conditions, subject remained on mountain for 14 additional hours after ordered withdrawal to continue search for missing hikers. All 11 civilians survived. Saris slowly lowered the display. He disobeyed direct orders. "Yes," Alara said softly. "To save strangers." Before Saris could respond, alarms erupted across the control room. One technician pointed toward the simulation map. Structural instability detected near Team 12. Inside the mountain chamber, Ryan had already noticed. He stood abruptly. "Everybody up." Cadet Larissa immediately obeyed. "What is wrong?" Ryan listened to the wind for several seconds. Then he looked toward a narrow ridge ahead. "The mountain is changing." The team hurried forward through deep snow. Minutes later, they reached the ridge and stopped. Beyond it lay salvation. Less than half a mile away, through the blizzard, the emergency extraction platform glowed faintly beneath station lights. Relief swept through the group. Then Cadet Sarah collapsed. Ryan was beside her instantly. One glance told him everything. Severe cold exhaustion. Sarah looked up weakly. "Leave me," she whispered. Ryan tightened the thermal liner around her shoulders. "That is not how this works." Then, without hesitation, the human lifted the young cadet onto his back and began walking toward the extraction platform through the storm. Ryan Miller carried Cadet Sarah across the mountainside as winds exceeding 70 miles per hour hammered Team 12 from every direction. Snow swirled so thickly that the extraction platform disappeared and reappeared like a ghost through the storm. Sarah protested weakly. "You cannot carry me and survive." Ryan adjusted her weight without slowing. "Good thing I am not planning on carrying you forever." Despite exhaustion, several cadets managed tired laughter. The sound lifted morale immediately. Ryan noticed. "Keep talking," he called over the wind. Silence means people stop thinking. Cadet Larissa moved beside him. Hours earlier, she had mocked the human openly. Now she matched her pace to his without hesitation. "Your oxygen consumption must be dangerously high." Ryan nodded. "Probably." "Then why are you still carrying her?" Ryan looked genuinely confused. "Because she cannot walk." Larissa fell silent. The answer sounded absurdly simple. Yet none of the highly trained alien cadets had offered an alternative. Ahead, the extraction platform lights suddenly vanished. Every recruit stopped. Panic flashed across several faces. "We lost it," one cadet whispered. Ryan immediately knelt, carefully lowering Sarah beside the others. He studied the snow for several seconds. Then he looked upward. "No." He pointed into the storm. The wind shifted. "The platform is still there." Cadet Larissa stared into the white void. "How can you possibly know?" Ryan listened quietly. "Because I can hear the emergency beacon." Nobody else heard anything. Yet they followed him anyway. Above the chamber, Captain Alara Voss and the engineering staff watched the tracking display anxiously. Team 12's life signs fluctuated dangerously. Engineers had finally restored limited sensor access, but environmental controls remained offline. "Can we deploy rescue teams?" Alara demanded. A technician shook his head. "Not until the weather stabilizes." Automated doors remain locked. Alara clenched her hands behind her back. Military doctrine required commanders to remain detached during training incidents. At that moment, she hated doctrine. Deep inside the simulation sector, Ryan suddenly raised his hand. "Stop." The team froze. Through a brief break in the storm, the extraction platform appeared less than 200 yards away. Relief swept through the group. Then the ground beneath the lead cadet shifted. A section of snow collapsed, revealing a narrow ice crevasse hidden beneath fresh accumulation. The cadet stumbled backward safely, but the direct route vanished. Strong winds immediately widened the gap. The extraction platform remained tantalizingly close on the opposite side. Cadets exchanged worried glances. Ryan studied the opening, measured distances visually, then removed several lengths of emergency climbing line from his pack. "We build a crossing." For the next 20 minutes, the human directed the entire operation. He anchored safety lines, assigned positions, and personally crossed first to secure the far side. One by one, every cadet reached the platform safely. Sarah crossed last, supported by both Ryan and Larissa. The instant Team 12 stepped onto the extraction platform, emergency systems finally reactivated. Warm air flooded the chamber. Automated rescue doors opened. Station personnel rushed forward. Captain Alara arrived moments later. She expected chaos. Instead, she found 6 exhausted cadets standing together around a human whose face and uniform were covered with ice. More surprising still, every member of Team 12 instinctively positioned themselves beside him. Not behind him, beside him. And for the first time since Ryan Miller arrived at Valkyr Station, nobody laughed. Medical Bay 3 glowed with soft amber lighting as exhausted cadets from Team 12 underwent post-exercise evaluations. Warm air replaced the brutal cold of the simulation chamber, yet many recruits still shivered beneath thermal blankets. Ryan Miller sat quietly on the edge of an examination table while a medical scanner moved across his chest. The device emitted a soft chime. Mild hypothermia, the medical officer announced. Oxygen depletion. Significant fatigue. Ryan nodded. Understood. You should remain here for observation. Ryan immediately looked toward the neighboring treatment station where Cadet Sarah rested. How is she? The medical officer followed his gaze. Stable. Thanks to rapid intervention. Ryan relaxed visibly. Across the bay, Captain Alara Voss observed the interaction in silence. During the previous hour, she had reviewed every available record connected to Ryan Miller. The file was unlike any military profile she had ever encountered. No combat citations. No tactical awards. No advanced weapons qualifications. Yet page after page documented impossible acts of endurance. Missing hikers recovered during winter storms. Injured climbers evacuated from remote terrain. Children found alive after blizzards. Again and again, one notation appeared. Subject repeatedly returned into hazardous conditions after civilian authorities terminated active search operations. Alara finally approached him. Ryan immediately stood despite obvious exhaustion. Ma'am. Alara studied him carefully. Remain seated, recruit. Ryan obeyed. For several seconds, neither spoke. Nearby cadets watched openly. Why did you ignore Cadet Sarah's request? Alara finally asked. Ryan looked confused. Ma'am, she instructed you to leave her behind. Ryan nodded slowly. Yes. Yet you refused. Ryan considered the question as though the answer should be obvious. She was part of the team. Alara folded her arms. Military protocol sometimes requires difficult sacrifices. Ryan looked toward Sarah. Search and rescue protocol says everyone comes home if possible. The words settled over the room. Cadet Larissa quietly rose from her treatment station. Captain, she said formally. Recruit Miller saved every member of Team 12. Another cadet spoke immediately afterward. Then another. Soon, all 5 recruits described what had happened inside the mountains. How Ryan recognized avalanche conditions. How he shared equipment. How he navigated without instruments. How he carried Sarah. How he crossed the crevasse first despite worsening conditions. None exaggerated. They simply stated facts. Yet each testimony changed the atmosphere inside the medical bay. The human once dismissed as physically inferior now sat surrounded by recruits speaking about him with unmistakable respect. Lieutenant Saris entered moments later carrying an updated incident report. Captain, she said quietly. Engineering completed analysis. Alara accepted the datapad. The findings confirmed that Sector 12 had experienced conditions significantly beyond training specifications. Survival probabilities without experienced wilderness leadership had been extremely low. Alara lowered the report slowly. Every officer present understood the implication. Team 12 had not merely completed an exercise. They had survived an actual disaster. Captain Alara stepped directly before Ryan. The entire medical bay became silent. Ryan remained seated, looking mildly uncomfortable beneath so much attention. Recruit Miller, Alara said formally. Why did you volunteer for the Interstellar Defense Academy? Ryan thought for several seconds. Because people need help everywhere, ma'am. No one laughed. Not a single person. And somewhere deep inside Valkyr Station, word about the human recruit who treated a lethal mountain like home had already begun to spread. The following morning, Training Hall 7 looked very different. The polished floor remained the same. The bright lights remained the same. Yet the atmosphere had changed completely. Recruits who had once whispered and laughed now fell silent whenever Ryan Miller entered a room. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply watched him with open curiosity. Rumors traveled quickly aboard Valkyr Station. By sunrise, nearly every cadet knew about the human who had led Team 12 through a lethal system failure and brought everyone home. Ryan appeared entirely unaffected by the attention. He arrived for morning formation exactly 3 minutes early, placed his duffel bag beside the assigned position, and quietly checked the seal on his training gloves. Captain Alara Voss observed him from the command platform. "He truly does not care," Lieutenant Sari said beside her. Alara kept her eyes on the human. "No," she replied softly. "He truly does not understand why anyone would praise him." The sharp tone announcing formation echoed through the chamber. Hundreds of cadets immediately snapped to attention. Captain Alara descended to the training floor. This time, however, she stopped directly in front of Team 12. "Step forward," she ordered. The 6 cadets obeyed instantly. Alara activated a holographic display visible throughout the chamber. Security footage from Sector 12 appeared above the recruits. The entire academy watched in silence as recordings showed avalanche conditions, failing systems, and the increasingly dangerous environment. They watched Ryan repeatedly stop to assist struggling teammates. They watched him surrender his own thermal equipment. They watched him carry Cadet Sarah through the storm. Finally, they watched the human cross the unstable crevasse, first, while securing safety lines for everyone else. The footage ended. Absolute silence filled Training Hall 7. Captain Alara looked toward the assembled recruits. "Yesterday," she said clearly, "many among you judged Recruit Miller according to physical measurements." Her golden eyes swept across the chamber. "You evaluated height, muscle mass, bone density, atmospheric requirements." She paused. "You were wrong." No one moved. "The purpose of this academy is not to create warriors who survive alone. It is to create leaders who ensure others survive with them." Alara turned toward Ryan. Recruit Miller demonstrated exceptional leadership, adaptability, and selfless service under genuine emergency conditions. Ryan looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," Team 12 worked together. Cadet Larissa immediately stepped forward. Respectfully, "Captain, we followed Recruit Miller because he knew how to bring us home." Several cadets from Team 12 voiced agreement immediately. Across the chamber, murmurs spread. Captain Alara studied Ryan for several seconds. Then she made a decision. "Cadet Sarah." The young Orlith stepped forward. "Who saved your life?" Sarah looked directly at Ryan. "He did, ma'am." Alara nodded once. She then faced the entire academy. "Remember this lesson. Equipment fails. Systems fail. Plans fail." Her voice carried across the silent hall. "Character does not." Ryan lowered his eyes, clearly wishing to disappear into the floor. The reaction only deepened the respect visible on countless faces around him. Because everyone understood something important at exactly the same moment. The human had never acted to earn admiration. He had acted because leaving someone behind had simply never been an option. 3 days later, every cadet aboard Valkyr Station assembled once again inside Training Hall 7. This time, the atmosphere carried a different energy. Conversations were quieter. Movements were sharper. The recent disaster inside Simulation Sector 12 had changed more than training procedures. It had changed people. Ryan Miller stood in formation exactly where he had stood on his first day. The difference was impossible to ignore. No empty space surrounded him now. Cadets from multiple species stood nearby voluntarily, exchanging quiet greetings before formation began. Cadet Larissa occupied the position directly beside him. Cadet Sarah stood on his other side. Ryan still looked faintly confused by all of it. The familiar signal tone echoed through the chamber. Instantly, hundreds of recruits snapped to attention. Captain Alara Voss descended from the command platform, wearing full ceremonial officer uniform. Silver insignia reflected beneath the bright training lights. Behind her marched the entire senior officer cadre of Valkyr Station. A rare sight. Whispers immediately spread before silence reclaimed the hall. Alara stopped before the assembled academy. 3 days ago, she began. A systems failure transformed a routine exercise into a genuine survival emergency. A holographic display illuminated above the chamber, showing images from Sector 12. Snow, wind, darkness. 6 recruits moving through impossible conditions. Official review determined that Team 12 survived because one recruit demonstrated extraordinary leadership under extreme circumstances. Ryan visibly shifted, already uncomfortable. Alara continued. Interstellar Defense Academy regulations permit formal recognition for exceptional service, regardless of rank. The entire hall became perfectly still. Recruit Ryan Miller. Front and center. Ryan obeyed immediately. He stopped precisely 3 steps before Captain Alara and stood at attention. For a moment, neither moved. Alara looked directly into the human's blue-gray eyes. Recruit Miller, records show that during the emergency, you repeatedly placed team survival above personal safety. You surrendered essential equipment, assumed command without hesitation, and refused to abandon a fellow cadet despite worsening conditions. Ryan answered quietly. Anyone would have done the same, ma'am. A faint smile touched Alara's expression. No, recruit. They would not have. She removed a small silver insignia from a ceremonial case. By authority of Valkyr Station Command, you are hereby awarded the Academy Merit Star for selfless service. She attached the insignia to Ryan's uniform. Then something entirely unexpected happened. Captain Alara stepped backward. She placed her closed fist against her chest in the ancient Orolith warrior salute. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. The salute was traditionally reserved for proven warriors and honored equals. Lieutenant Saris immediately repeated the gesture. Then every senior officer followed. A heartbeat later, Cadet Larissa saluted. Then Sarah. Then the entire academy. Hundreds of recruits stood in absolute silence, offering military respect to the human recruit they had once laughed at. Ryan looked genuinely overwhelmed. He glanced across the sea of raised fists and respectful faces. Finally, he cleared his throat softly. Thank you, he said. But Team 12 brought each other home. He paused. I was just holding the rope. No one lowered their salute. Because everyone present understood something profound. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the one who stands tallest. It is the one who refuses to let go when everyone else is slipping. And on Valkyr Station, the officers who once laughed at the human recruit would remember that lesson for the rest of their lives.